My daughter thought she was being clever when she slipped that envelope into my desk drawer, tucked behind my tax folders, where she assumed I'd never look twice. But 28 years running my own construction company taught me that people always hide things in plain sight. When I found what was inside that envelope, my stomach dropped, not because of what it was, but because I understood exactly what my own child was trying to do to me. She had no idea I was already 3 steps ahead. This story will show you how a father's trust was shattered, and how the lessons of a lifetime became the only thing standing between me and ruin. But first, tell me in the comments, what would you do if your own daughter tried to take everything from you? Don't forget to subscribe for the full story. The kitchen smelled like coffee and bacon that Thursday morning in Summerville, South Carolina. At 63, my mornings had become predictable, up at 5:30. Feed the dog, brew a pot of dark roast, and sit on the back porch, watching the sun come up over the marsh. Since Helen passed 4 years ago, those quiet mornings were the only peace I got. The rest of the day was just filling time. My daughter showed up unannounced around 8, letting herself in through the side door like she still lived here. She was 31, and for the past 5 months she'd been staying in the guest room after her second divorce. I didn't ask too many questions when she moved back in. That's what fathers do. You open the door and hope for the best. "Morning, Dad," she said, setting her purse on the counter. She was dressed nicely blouse, slacks, heels, which was unusual for someone who claimed to be between jobs. "I'm heading out for a bit, meeting a friend about a possible position at her company." I nodded from behind my coffee mug. Something about her energy was off. She was moving too fast, talking too brightly, the way people do when they're performing instead of just being. 28 years of managing crews, negotiating contracts, and reading subcontractors who were trying to cut corners had given me a sharp eye for dishonesty. Most people telegraph their lies through their bodies long before the words come out. "Good luck," I said. "Hope it works out." She smiled too wide, held too long, and disappeared down the hallway toward my office. I heard the door open and close. She was in there maybe 90 seconds. When she came back through the kitchen, her purse was zipped tight against her hip and her eyes wouldn't meet mine. "All right, I'm off. Don't wait up." I listened to her car pull out of the driveway, gravel crunching under the tires. Then I sat there for a long time, staring at the hallway that led to my office, trying to convince myself that my daughter hadn't just done what I think she did. But I couldn't convince myself, because I knew what I saw. I should back up to the night before, because that's when things started unraveling in a way I couldn't ignore anymore. We'd been eating dinner, leftover pot roast. I'd reheated. Nothing fancy. The television was on in the other room. Some game show Helen used to love. I still kept it on during meals out of habit, like her laugh might come floating through the doorway if the right joke landed. My daughter had barely touched her plate. She kept checking her phone under the table, thinking I didn't notice. Her knee bounced against the table leg, rattling the silverware. "Dad, can we talk about something?" I set down my fork. "Sure." She took a breath so deep her shoulders rose and fell visibly. "I'm in a tough spot. Financially, the divorce lawyers took everything, and I've got some debts that are coming due. I was wondering if maybe you could help me out." "How much are we talking?" She hesitated. 40,000. I almost choked on my water. $40,000. What kind of debts add up to $40,000 from a divorce? Her expression shifted. Something flickered across her face that I didn't like. Frustration. Maybe. Or anger poorly disguised as desperation. "It's complicated. Legal fees. Credit cards. Some other stuff. I just need a bridge loan until I get back on my feet." "Other stuff? Does it matter?" Her voice went sharp. "I'm your daughter. I'm asking for help." That phrase, "does it matter," hung in the air between us like a warning sign. In my experience, when someone tells you the details don't matter, The details are exactly what matters. I've already helped you with rent, your car insurance, groceries for 5 months. I'm on a fixed income now. The company pension and Social Security only stretch so far. 40,000 would wipe out most of what I have saved. She stood up from the table so fast her chair tipped backward. Forget it. I knew you wouldn't understand. She grabbed her plate, scraped the food into the trash, and dropped the dish in the sink hard enough that I thought it might crack. Then she went upstairs without another word. I sat alone at that table for a long time, listening to her pace back and forth above me, through the ceiling. I could hear muffled phone conversations, her voice low. Urgent. Sometimes pleading. At one point I thought I heard her crying. But it might have been the television. Helen would have known what to do. She always had a way of getting through to our daughter when I couldn't. She'd sit on the edge of the bed and just listen until the real problem surfaced. But Helen wasn't here. And whatever was happening with my daughter had gone beyond what listening could fix. So there I was the next morning, standing in the hallway outside my office, knowing something was wrong and not wanting to confirm it. I opened the door. Everything looked normal at first. My desk was cluttered the way it always was, stacks of old invoices, a cube full of pens, Helen's photo in the silver frame she'd picked out herself. But something felt off. The tax folder in my bottom drawer was slightly forward, like someone had pulled it out and pushed it back without paying attention to the exact position. I opened the drawer and lifted the folder. Behind it, pressed flat against the back of the drawer, was a manila envelope I had never seen before. Inside were documents. A lot of them. The first was a power of attorney form with my name on it, granting my daughter full control over my finances, my property, and my medical decisions. My signature was at the bottom, except I had never signed it. The second document was a loan application from a private lending company called Palmetto Capital Partners, requesting $75,000 against the equity in my house. Again, my signature. Again, not mine. The third was a letter from the same lending company confirming that the loan had been approved pending a final verification visit scheduled for the following Monday. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set the papers down on the desk. I pulled up a chair because my legs didn't feel reliable anymore. $75,000. My house, the house Helen and I had built together in 1994. The house where we raised our daughter. The house where Helen took her last breath in the bedroom upstairs was about to be leveraged for money. I never borrowed. Based on signatures I never gave. I thought about calling the police right then. I thought about confronting my daughter the moment she walked through the door. I thought about a dozen things that my anger wanted me to do. But 28 years of running a business had taught me that reactive decisions were almost always bad decisions. When a subcontractor tried to scam me on a job, I didn't blow up on the spot. I gathered evidence, documented everything, consulted my lawyer, and then made my move when I was ready, not when my emotions told me to. I photographed every document with my phone, front and back. Then I put them back exactly where I found them, matching the position of the folder as closely as I could remember. If my daughter checked the drawer, everything needed to look untouched. Then I started investigating. Her room was a mess, which made searching it both easier and harder. Easier because she clearly wasn't organized enough to hide things well. Harder because there was so much clutter. But I found what I needed in her nightstand drawer, underneath a romance novel and a phone charger. It were credit card statements from 3 different cards all maxed out, totaling over $22,000. But the charges weren't for legal fees. They were for an online gambling platform called Lucky Bet. Deposits of $500, $1,000, $2,000 at a time, week after week, going back almost a year, long before the divorce, long before she moved back in her closet, stuffed inside a boot she never wore. I found a stack of handwritten IOUs to someone named Vincent Torres. The amounts ranged from $5,000 to $15,000, with interest rates that would make a loan shark blush. The most recent one, dated 2 weeks ago, had a note scrawled at the bottom in different handwriting. Final extension. Friday or we move forward. Friday was tomorrow. The picture came together the way a blueprint resolves itself when you've been staring at the pieces long enough. My daughter had a gambling addiction, probably started during her first marriage, worsened during her second, and exploded after the divorce left her without a safety net. She'd burned through credit cards, then borrowed from this Vincent Torres at predatory rates. When she couldn't pay Vincent, she'd come to me for $40,000. When I said no, she moved to the backup plan. The forged power of attorney gave her legal authority over my assets. The loan against my house would generate $75,000, enough to pay off Vincent, cover the credit cards, and have some left over to keep gambling. By the time I discovered what happened, she'd have the money, and I'd be left fighting to prove the documents were fraudulent while my house sat under someone else's lien. It was brilliant, in a sickening way. And it would have worked, too, if I hadn't spent nearly 3 decades spotting forged signatures on change orders and fraudulent invoices from subcontractors trying to bill me for work they never did. The signature on those documents was close. I'll give her that. She must have practiced. But the pressure was wrong. I bear down hard on the T in my last name, a habit from decades of signing contracts on rough surfaces at construction sites. Her version was smooth, consistent, a careful imitation missing the one detail only someone who'd watched me sign 1,000 documents would catch. And even then, she missed it. I put everything back. Every credit card statement. Every IOU. Every document returned to its hiding place. Then I went back to my office and made 2 phone calls. The first was to my lawyer, Ed Kavanaugh, who'd handled my business contracts for 15 years. I told him what I found and sent him the photos. He went quiet for a long time before saying, "Frank, this is felony fraud, forging a power of attorney, taking a loan against someone's property with a fraudulent signature. She's looking at serious prison time." I know. What do you want to do? I want to make sure my house is protected, and then I want to handle the rest. Ed made some calls. Within 2 hours, he'd filed an emergency fraud alert with the county recorder's office, flagging any transactions involving my property. He also contacted Palmetto Capital Partners and informed them that the loan application contained forged documents. They froze the application immediately. My second call was to a buddy of mine, Carl Redmond, retired detective from the Charleston County Sheriff's Office. Carl and I had served on the local business association together for years, and I trusted him more than just about anybody. I need advice. I told him, not as a friend, as someone who knows how the law works. I laid everything out. Carl listened without interrupting, which is how you know a man is taking you seriously. When I finished, he said something I didn't expect. "Frank, the loan's been stopped. Your property's flagged. Legally, you're protected. But the IOUs to Vincent Torres, that's a different problem. If your daughter owes money to someone who writes, 'We move forward' as a threat, she might be in physical danger. And if she's desperate enough to forge your signature, she's desperate enough to do something worse when the money doesn't come through." He was right. The deadline was tomorrow. When my daughter discovered the loan had been frozen, when Vincent Torres didn't get his money, things could escalate fast. What do you suggest? Let me make some calls. Torres isn't a new name to us. He's been on the periphery of some gambling and loan sharking cases in the Low Country for years. If your daughter is willing to cooperate, this could be bigger than a family dispute. I agreed to let Carl work his end, but I still had my own moves to make. My daughter came home around 6 that evening, carrying takeout bags from a barbecue place downtown. She was in a good mood, almost giddy, which told me she believed everything was proceeding according to plan. "I brought dinner," she announced, setting the bags on the kitchen counter. "Pulled pork and coleslaw. Your favorite." "That's thoughtful," I said, watching her from my recliner. "How'd the meeting go?" "Really promising. I think something good is finally happening. She was lying. Of course. There was no friend. No job meeting. She'd probably spent the day checking on the loan status and confirming arrangements with Vincent. But I played along because that's what the situation required. I ate pulled pork with my daughter and talked about the weather and the neighbor's new fence, while knowing that she had forged my signature to steal my house. That night, after she went to bed, I couldn't sleep. I stood in the kitchen at 2 in the morning, looking at Helen's photo on the refrigerator, the one from our trip to Savannah, where she's laughing at something I said, her head thrown back. Completely unself-conscious. I talked to her sometimes. In those late hours when the house was quiet and the loneliness pressed down like something physical, I don't know what to do. Helen, I whispered. She's our girl, but she's trying to take everything we built. Helen didn't answer. Obviously. But I thought about what she'd told me in her final weeks. When she knew she was running out of time, don't let her mistakes become your prison. Frank, love her, but don't lose yourself doing it. At the time, I thought she was talking about the divorce. Now I understood she might have seen something. I hadn't the early signs of a daughter spinning out of control, heading toward a cliff that no amount of fatherly love could stop. Friday morning came gray and humid. Typical for South Carolina, in late September. I was on the porch with my coffee when my daughter came down looking like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were puffy. Her movements agitated. Dad, I need to go out for a while. Iran. On a Friday morning. Just stuff. She grabbed her keys and hesitated at the door. Dad? If anyone comes by asking about financial documents or anything like that, just tell them you'll handle it later. Okay, my chest tightened. She was expecting someone, maybe from Palmetto Capital, for the verification visit. Maybe Vincent Torres himself. Sure. Honey. She left. I immediately called Carl. It's today. I said. She's expecting something to go down. Already on it. We've got eyes on Torres. If he shows up at your house or makes contact with your daughter, we'll be ready. But, Frank, I need you to understand something. Once this starts, there's no taking it back. I know. She's your daughter. I know that too. The hours crept by like molasses. I tried to read. Couldn't concentrate. Tried watching television. Couldn't sit still. I ended up in the garage, reorganizing my tools the way I used to reorganize job sites when I was stressed, putting everything in order because the world around me was chaos. At 11:15, a black SUV pulled into my driveway. A man I'd never seen got out mid-40s. Thick build. Wearing a polo shirt that was trying too hard to look casual. He walked to my front door and knocked 3 times. I opened it. Mr. Mitchell, that's me. I'm here about a scheduled property verification for Palmetto Capital Partners. Come in. I led him to the kitchen table. He opened a briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents, the same loan application I'd photographed 2 days ago, plus additional forms I hadn't seen. He pointed to the signature line. Mr. Mitchell, I just need you to confirm your identity and verify that this is your signature on the loan application. I looked at the signature, my forged signature, written by my daughter's hand. That's not my signature. I said. The man blinked. Excuse me, I said, that's not my signature. I never applied for this loan. I never signed these documents. Somebody forged my name. The color drained from his face. Mr. Mitchell, this is a very serious allegation. I know exactly how serious it is, and I have evidence to prove it. I pulled out my phone and showed him the photographs, the forged power of attorney, the loan application, side-by-side comparisons with my actual signature from legitimate contracts. Ed Kavanaugh had already prepared a sworn affidavit, which I handed over as well. The verification agent stared at the documents for a long time. Then he excused himself to make a phone call from the driveway. When he came back, his demeanor had completely changed. Mr. Mitchell, Palmetto Capital is launching a formal fraud investigation. We'll need to involve law enforcement. Already done, I said. Detective Carl Redmond from the Charleston County Sheriff's Office is coordinating. Here's his number. The agent left 20 minutes later, looking shaken. I sat at the kitchen table and waited, because I knew what was coming next. My daughter got home at 2 in the afternoon. She walked through the door with her phone pressed to her ear, mid-conversation, and stopped dead when she saw my face. "I'll call you back," she said into the phone, then dropped it into her purse. "Dad, what's wrong?" "Sit down." "What happened? You look." "Sit down." She sat. I placed the photographs on the table between us. The power of attorney, the loan application, the forged signatures, her credit card statements from Lucky Bet, the IOUs to Vincent Torres. All of it laid out like evidence at a trial. "You want to tell me what this is?" Her face went through every color I'd ever seen. White, red, gray. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out for a long time. Then the tears started. "Dad, I can explain. You forged my signature. You tried to take a $75,000 loan against my house. The house your mother and I built, the house she died in. I was desperate. You don't understand. These people are going to hurt me." Vincent said if I don't pay by tonight, Vincent Torres won't be hurting anyone. Carl Redmond has had him under surveillance since yesterday. The sheriff's department is moving on him this afternoon. The blood drained from her face. "What?" "I found the envelope in my desk drawer on Thursday morning, about 20 minutes after you put it there. I found the IOUs in your closet. I found the gambling statements in your nightstand. I found everything. Dad, please, the loan has been frozen. My attorney filed a fraud alert with the county. Palmetto Capital knows the signatures are forged. Their verification agent was here this morning." She was sobbing now. Hard, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. Part of me wanted to reach across the table and hold her the way I had when she was small, when a scraped knee or a bad grade was the worst thing in the world. But this wasn't a scraped knee. This was fraud, forgery, and theft. This was my daughter trying to steal my home. "I'm sorry," she gasped between sobs. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know what else to do. I owe Vincent $42,000 and he said he'd..." "Stop." I held up my hand. "I've already talked to Carl about this. Here's what's going to happen. You have two choices. Option 1, Carl's team arrests Vincent Torres tonight. You cooperate fully with the investigation, testify about his loan sharking operation, provide all the documentation. In exchange, they'll push for reduced charges on the forgery." "Reduced charges, Dad?" "I can't go to." Option 2, I file criminal charges myself, and you face the forgery and fraud case without any cooperation deal. Full penalties. Your choice. The look on her face in that moment is something I'll carry for the rest of my life. Not the crying, not the fear, but the moment she realized that her father wasn't going to save her from this, that there wasn't going to be a last-minute rescue, a check written in the nick of time, a fatherly pass that made the consequences disappear. That moment of reckoning, when the child you raised finally sees you as someone who won't be manipulated anymore. It's the loneliest feeling in the world. She chose option 1. Carl's team arrested Vincent Torres that evening at a restaurant off King Street in Charleston. They found records of over 30 victims of his loan sharking operation, many of them gamblers he'd specifically targeted through online platforms. My daughter's IOUs were part of a much larger pattern. She spent 6 hours with detectives that night, giving a full statement. I drove her there and waited in the lobby, drinking vending machine coffee that tasted like regret. The legal process took months. My daughter pleaded guilty to 1 count of forgery and 1 count of attempted fraud, both reduced from the original charges in exchange for her cooperation. The judge, an older woman named Judge Patricia Lawson, who'd clearly seen cases like this before, sentenced her to 2 years of probation. Mandatory, gambling, addiction treatment, full restitution for the legal costs I'd incurred, and 300 hours of community service. Ms. Mitchell, the judge said, looking at my daughter over her reading glasses. You came very close to destroying the one person who still cared enough about you to give you a way out instead of locking the door. I hope you understand how rare that is. My daughter nodded. I don't know if she understood. Not then. After the sentencing, I drove her to the residential treatment facility in Colombia, a 90-day program specifically for gambling addiction. She didn't say much during the 2-hour drive. When we pulled into the parking lot, she finally spoke. Are you going to be there when I get out? I looked at her. My daughter, Helen's daughter, the little girl who used to ride on my shoulders at the Somerville Town Fair, who handed me nails one by one when I was building the deck out back, who cried at her mother's funeral so hard I thought something inside her had broken permanently. Maybe it had. I'll be there, I said, but things will be different. I know. No, you don't. Not yet. But you will. She got out of the car and walked toward the building without looking back. I sat in the parking lot for a long time, watching the door she'd gone through, wondering if the daughter who came out in 3 months would be someone I recognized. 6 months have passed since that day. I'm sitting on my back porch this morning, watching the marsh the way I always do, coffee in hand. Helen's old dog sleeping at my feet. The house is still mine. Ed Kavanaugh made sure of that. And Palmetto Capital formally withdrew the fraudulent application and issued an apology. My daughter completed her 90-day program and is living in a sober house in Colombia. She has a job at a bookstore. Minimum wage. Nothing glamorous. But she earned it on her own. She calls me every Sunday. And the conversations are different now. Shorter. Quieter. More careful. We're both learning how to talk to each other without the weight of secrets between us. She asked me last week if she could come home for Thanksgiving. I told her I'd think about it. And I meant it. Not as punishment, but because thinking is what I do now before making decisions about her. No more reflexive, después. No more writing checks to make problems disappear. No more confusing love with enabling. Carl tells me Vincent Torres took a plea deal 8 years for racketeering and loan sharking. His operation was bigger than anyone expected. And my daughter's testimony was apparently crucial to the case. Some good came out of her worst mistake. Even if she didn't intend it. I think about Helen every day. I think about what she said. Don't let her mistakes become your prison. I think she'd be proud of how I handled it. Even though it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than building a company from nothing. Harder than burying my wife. Because with those things, the right choice was obvious. With your own child, nothing is obvious. Everything is gray. My toolbox sits in the garage, organized the way I like it. My desk drawer has a new lock on it. Small changes that mean more than they should. I drive to the marsh some mornings and just sit, watching the herons wade through the shallows, patient and unhurried, taking only what they need. Sometimes the people you love the most are the ones capable of hurting you the worst. Not because they're evil, but because they know exactly where you're vulnerable, and desperation makes people forget that some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed again. Protecting yourself from someone you love isn't cruelty. It's the hardest form of honesty there is. I spent 63 years learning that my daughter is just starting. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to set a boundary with someone you love, even when it broke your heart? How did you find the strength? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories about resilience, family, and the courage to protect what matters most. And remember, love without limits isn't love. It's surrender.